Hi, Tom. Thank
Hello.
you for being here once again. We tried to record first and we had a beautiful conversation. And now we want to do it again to make it even more beautiful and probably more audible as well. So, Tom and I met around last year, right? At the freelance business community event. It is a very beautiful thing that our common network is doing, which is promoting better way of doing freelancing, helping with tips and ideas. And naturally, there's so many people that are doing freelancing these days, and many of them are doing it from the comfort of their homes in many different countries. Probably they also moved somewhere. So Tom has an amazing expertise on becoming a better freelancer, both in terms of skills, but also in terms of expertise and being recognized in the world for what you're really able to offer, probably even a bit despite or not very much related to where you're from. We can start with your first day in immigration, your first day in London, and
Absolutely.
maybe even the first week.
Thank you for your very generous introduction. I wouldn't say that I'm recognized all over the world. Not at all, not even
Not
close.
yet.
Not, not yet. Yeah, we'll see. But thank you for the intro. I'll try to be as brief as I can about myself, but in main bullet points. I started in the tech industry around 20 years now. I started my first company when I was 22. I've been freelancing and a strong advocate of remote work since day one because I never believed in working in the office. And I always did my best work in an environment that I can control. Working from home for me was just something natural. We all work in a different way. Some people work 9 to 5, some people work 12 to 9, whatever works for them, right? So I think this is why remote work has been something that I've been a strong advocate of for years until COVID happened and kind of made my point that people can work remotely. I moved to London a little over 5 years ago now, primarily because my wife got a job. So she was the reason that we moved. She's a veterinarian and she finished university, graduated, we got married, and she got offered a position here in London. And because I was working remotely anyway, I didn't care where I lived. And I already had a company registered in UK anyway. At that point, UK was still part of EU, so it was just a natural thing for me to just come here and continue my business as usual. For the first 5 years, for the last 5 years, I've been working with mostly either startups or big companies working on their B2B software as a product designer, designing mostly dashboard stuff and solving business problems. So I freelance in product design consulting. That's my main thing. I sort of work, I do stand-up comedy for past 18 years, and I do a lot of talks and workshops. I travel the world speaking at conferences. I do a podcast as well, and that's me in short. And to answer your question, how was my first week in immigration? So my wife came here ahead of me like a month to find us a place. She stayed with her uncle, but it wasn't her first time in London. We've been in London multiple times before. And the first time in London for me was, I think, some 4 years before we actually moved. I loved the city on day one. I loved the vibe, the people, the business side of it as well. I continued to come back every once in a while just to be part of the community, the events. There's a lot of meetups going on, a lot of amazing stuff happening in London. So I wanted to be part of that. Back then, when I was working in Croatia, I would like save up money for a ticket and then come here and spend a week or so just being in the middle of it all. The first week for me was my wife already found us a flat, sorted that out. So my job was then to pack the stuff back in Croatia and ship everything over. And while that was en route, I flew to Paris because we still have a cat, and UK has very specific laws about you cannot fly with the animal in the cabin, so it has to go into the holding, and I didn't want to do that. So I flew to Paris, where then my friend who already lived in London, who I also know from Croatia, he picked me up at Paris airport, and then we drove to London. So that was my first day coming in. And first week was, it's kind of a blur. It was sort of a surreal, like, oh, I can't believe I'm actually here. Is this really happening? Did I really move away from my home, my country, my family, my friends, everybody. One of the reasons why we wanted to move in general was we wanted to live here, but a lot of our friends moved away already. Over the half of my closest friends were not just in UK, they were all over, some US, Sweden, Norway, so on. When we got here, first week was very, need to find a word, but it was very weird in a sense that it felt like, when you're not sure if you're awake or you're dreaming, and it's kind of like what's going on. And I already had a job set up, so I started going to work. I think I landed on Thursday, and on Monday was my day one of work. It was kind of like straight into the middle of it. Go to the office, meet the team, meet everybody. But it took me a while to kind of get settled in to the speed of London. London is, compared to Zagreb in Croatia, is very fast. It's so much faster. And then I met a person from New York who told me, "Oh, I came to London to rest. New York is so fast." When I was visiting London and I wanted to be part of all of the events and communities, you set up for that and then you go in with 200% energy. But once you move and you realize the city actually never stops, it's always like that. So it took me way longer than a week just to kind of find my speed, find my gear, settle in properly, and do things in my own tempo.
Did you have any other options? Like London, what I'm hearing was the place you dreamed to move to eventually. Was it the only place that you dreamed about, or did you have
Yeah,
some other option?
there was no other, we never discussed anything else. When we started dating, we were kind of talking like, oh, we both wanted to live outside of Croatia. Like, where would that be? We both kind of settled on London. I have zero wishes to go to US, none whatsoever. Canada is too cold. North of Europe is too cold. Germany is too cold, but not from a weather perspective. London was the melting pot of all of the cultures and people. First place we lived in London was Brixton, which is very multicultural, from people all over the world. There's a strong Caribbean community as well, a lot of amazing foods. So this is where we were for first 2 years, and this is something that we really wanted. So we wanted South London. We kind of liked the vibe, the whole thing. So this is where we ended up.
Now, you saying that you have spent a lot of time trying to really realize that this finally happened, it gets a different flavor because I can imagine how it is to just be dreaming about it for so long that maybe you had doubts and fears on the way, and then it finally happens and you're like, but did it actually? And now I did this first thing, but can I keep it up? Can I actually stay here? Can I manage? To me, how I remember my move to Italy was probably very similar because I also did, like you said, a lot of reconnaissance. I traveled a lot. I met the people. I had some preparation. The language obviously slightly different because it is a different language than English, but still it is English. Probably of the UK is different English than the one that we learn as a second language. Do you remember if there was a moment when you're like, okay, now this is actually my home now, and I feel much more at home here than I would ever be in feeling in Croatia?
That's a kind of interesting point, because first time I was in London, when first time ever, not when I moved, but first time ever, when I landed and got on the tube, it was the feeling of, oh, I'm home. It kind of felt like this is where the home is. And because I always felt disconnected from Croatia, from the people in general, not talking about my close friends, but the way the people think and the way the people reason and the baggage that people carry with them is just not something that I resonate with. I always felt like an outsider since I was a kid in school, growing up. Never felt like this is where I belong. So when I got here, it felt great. And first interaction I ever had was with a person from London. I was staring at the tube underground map, and a person approached me and said like, "Oh, are you lost? Can I help you?" Like in the first 20 seconds. We got on the train and my wife was sitting down. I was standing up and we were talking, and this guy sitting next to her says like, "Oh, you can sit down and have my seat so you can talk to her more easily." And I was just like blown away. Where does this kindness come from? When I hear people in London say, "Oh, Londoners are not polite or not kind," that's really not true. You don't know Eastern Europeans. Amazing people when you get to know them, but they are not as friendly on the first. I understand that because there's a lot of fake surface level kindness in London as well, and then you go deep and they're not like that. There's definitely difference in culture. But when I first arrived, it felt like home. But then when I moved, it took me, I think, a couple of years. When we moved to our second place is only when it was like, okay, now like I'm really here. And then when we bought our house, then it was like, okay, this is now my house. We own a property. We are really here. And now we're not going anywhere for the foreseeable future. Now it's kind of like dropping the anchor. Now you're here. We can always sell it, of course, but I don't want to. This is what I wanted. This is the type of house that I wanted. This is the area that we wanted to be. We kind of created this checklist of things that we wanted to achieve, and we did. And now it really feels like this is home.
I love this. I love this. I'm not sure I've ever had this feeling yet. Somehow, maybe like at the first moment, I would love to one day. Yesterday, I was doing this research again. You know, when you open Nomad List and you put all your criteria, and there is nothing you find which is all of it. So you remove some things. Okay, I can compromise here, I can compromise there. And I wonder if I will ever be able to fulfill actually the checklist like you did.
But don't get me wrong, I don't think there were no compromises, right?
Mm,
There are like important bits, and then there are things that it doesn't really matter. Like they're nice to haves. So they're always nice to haves that you can compromise on it. And everything depends on what is your level of, how risk averse are you? What is your level of comfort that you're willing to sacrifice? Things like that, right? A lot of people would be like, oh, London property, for example, is very expensive. Like for the price of the house in London here, 2 bedroom, you can get a 5 bedroom villa in Croatia, right?
yeah.
But like, I don't want a 5 bedroom villa in Croatia. I want to live in an area where I like the people, I have the business opportunity, I can meet amazing people, I can do some great work. My wife's career is fulfilling. So this is the trade-off for me. A lot of people that I know focus on the material things, on the material side of life. I need to have a nice house and a nice car and show that off on Instagram and whatever. I take up half a square meter of space. I don't need 5 bedrooms, right? 1 bedroom is enough for us to sleep. The other one is my office because I still work from home. We have a nice kitchen, dining room, and a backyard. Done. One of the things I'm very grateful for is that I've developed this sense of having zero earthly wants. I don't have any materialistic aspirations. I don't need a fancy car. I don't need a $1 million word house, fancy clothing, all these bullshit things that people use to signal that they're happy. This is something that we focused on really early on. And now it's like there were things that we compromised on in terms of I don't know, for example, like it's a terraced house, right? You have neighbors. I would love to be alone, but again, you can't do that in London. You cannot be alone in London. It's really hard. So you have to go outside of the city, but then you compromise on the commute. Then it takes you an hour and a half to the center. Now it takes me 30 minutes. So I'm 30 minutes to city center, which is kind of the thing. So there are things that you weigh in and decide on. I think about that with everything in life. There's always a balance of things, and I can talk about that for hours, but this is not the topic for that.
Well, what you just said about zero earthly possessions actually intrigues me a lot because then I'm asking myself, how does this match with London? I just visited for like 1 day and a half. I didn't tell you because I didn't have time for anything. But it looks obviously like a very expensive place, and people show very expensive things, insane cars, houses, shops, everything. Well, not everything, I know. The bigger the city, the more there is this diversity of very different levels of living, people, cultures, etc. But still, London is London. It is one of the most expensive cities in the world. And when you say this, and also knowing that you are someone who actually supports other freelancers in charging more and building their wealth, this is where I'm like, wow, can you tell me a bit more about this?
Okay, so I know it sounds like a juxtaposition of two philosophies. I don't know who said this, but the quote was, if everybody had, let's say, a Ferrari, right? Let's say that everybody has a Ferrari, then Ferrari wouldn't be special. People who have these tendencies to have something as expensive as a Ferrari, I'm using cars are the best example, especially in London. It only is used to signal that you are better than others in this perspective of life, right? You cannot drive it fast in London because there are humps everywhere, speeding cameras, the streets are not built for it. So only thing that you're doing is showing off, right? People who have this position where like they are, look at me, I have this, you don't, and it makes them feel better, special, happy, fulfilled, whatever. My personal philosophy is that that's a wrong way of going about life. Same thing applies to a lot of things, like my clothing. This is a shirt from Zara, which was, I don't know, 10 pounds. It doesn't matter. It's a nice shirt. I like it. Love the design. It doesn't have to be 200-pound shirt, right? There are people who value things more than experiences. I don't. I value experiences, friendships, things that I can do with people, food. You have to sacrifice a lot if you want to achieve that monetary status where you are not a person who is giving things. So I'm not talking about people who were born into money. If you come from nothing, like we do, and go to a place like London and you want to get to a point where you can afford luxuries, then you have to put your head down and work a lot. And then you're trading off your most valuable resource, which is time, to gain and gather all of these things. And then once you have it, you realize, oh, I don't feel anything any different. People are chasing this dream that I think was sold to them. That especially if you watch TV, if you listen to like modern music, it's always like Balenciaga this and Gucci that. I use this as a great example, like Jay-Z, who before he was a billionaire, he was like wearing gold chains and he was showing off his wealth. When he became a billionaire, he's wearing a turtleneck and jeans because he doesn't have to show off anymore. It doesn't matter, right? And you don't need to climb that mountain to realize that it doesn't matter. A lot of people need to, unfortunately, go through this to realize it was not important. And Jim Carrey said, I wish that everybody had their dreams come true so they realize that it will change nothing. If you chase this kind of checklist life of, I have to have good grades to go into good school, to have good grades to go into good college, to get a good job so I can buy a good car and a good house and find a good spouse, then ultimately I will be happy. And then you do this for 20, 30 years, you're chasing this bag of money, and then you realize, oh, I'm 50 years old, I feel the same. And now I've got this, and my health is gone, my time is gone, especially if you have kids, your friends have kids, you don't have time for each other anymore. Suddenly your best years passed you by because you were chasing this bag of money for what? So you can show on Instagram, oh, look at me, I have a car. That's stupid. That's just retarded as fuck.
You know, the thing is, I have to be honest here. And maybe it's me, the person who is coming from nowhere, like you said, and live alone, that my city is barely existing at this point. I moved from Ukraine for a better life. And in my vision, a better life is, well, probably not everything that you just mentioned, right? Those luxuries and success, but in a sense, it's almost everything I've never had.
Yeah.
And I know that it's a reality for many people as well. They have a vision of their immigration, which is, or like why they're doing it. They want to build something of themselves, they want to reach it. Maybe they don't even think about themselves as like, I want to become recognized or I don't want to do this. And it's kind of coming later when you realize, well, I can't just, clean people's houses and do some menial work to actually reach it. I need to become someone of value to contribute to the world. I feel I'm still at that level. I have been chasing cash for a while because I just couldn't figure out how to make it stick to me. I come with a lot of these beliefs about money and how to make money and what I can make based on where I'm coming from. I know is not healthy or it's not how it's supposed to be, but it is like this.
I have the same problem because I grew up like you. I went to school during the war. I grew up in Croatia post-war, recovering from all the bullshit that happened. I understand coming from nothing, right? I love George Carlin's quote when he said, gathering material possession to feel happy is like taping sandwiches on your body not to feel hungry. It doesn't matter. And I understand the feeling of like, I never had money and I need to keep it. But if you never had money and you need to keep it, buying Gucci bullshit is not me keeping money. This is the difference. I understand, and I've seen this here in London, people who come from Eastern Europe, first thing they do with their first paycheck is a car, showing off a car. Pa, 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 look at my BMW, whatever. The public transport is so good, you really don't need a car. I'm here for 5 years. We are only now thinking of buying a car because we have a dog and we want to drive around and whatever. But it's not for commuting. You actually don't need a car. I've seen this with people from Croatia who went to work to Germany. They would buy a Mercedes and then come back home to show off to their village and their neighborhood, like, oh, look at me, I succeeded. And they actually live family of four in a one-bedroom place in Germany and then put all of the money in car to show off to people who actually don't give a shit about them, realistically. So this is where I think this comes from. Buy yourself something that makes you happy, but realize that, and I'm sure that you know this, you have saved some money and then you buy a new phone. It's amazing for a minute, 5, 10, maybe a day, maybe 2 days, and then it becomes a standard because we as humans are highly adaptable and our baseline changes immediately. So as soon as you get to the next state of living, whatever that is, you raise your standard and it becomes normal in a couple of days, like a normal thing. Like, this is what I do now. This is why people live at the edge of their means. Their salary goes up, then their spending goes up, and they're always kind of trying to keep up with the line instead of raising your line but staying down there. We could have bought, for the money that we are making, we could have bought a 4-bedroom house easy. In London it's called agreement in principle. The bank gives you how much mortgage they're going to give you, right? So they gave us 3 times more than what we actually paid the house, right? So we could have got easily like a 5-bedroom house with whatever, and then I would be spending 2/3 of my income monthly to pay for the house. Why? What's the point? The bed is the same. I would have the same bed. My TV is the same. When you reach a point where the richest person on the world, let's say Elon Musk, doesn't matter, and me and you, we have the same phone, right? He has the same phone. He has the same 24 hours in a day. He drinks the same coffee, the same milk. Everything's the same, right? You just have to see that 98% of the things we do daily does not differ after a certain point. And that point is actually very low. Like, pint of milk is a pint of milk. Like, yeah, you can get dairy farm with the golden standard, whatever. It's like a pound more. And that's it. But like, if you drink coffee with milk, you drink coffee with milk regardless of how much money you have. You have the latest iPhone regardless of how much money you have. You cannot have better than that, right? And then what people do, because they don't know how to feel happy, because we never learned that, especially in Eastern Europe, they try to supplement that with buying expensive shit. If I buy this purse or this shoes or this, then I'm going to be happy. And then you buy it and you feel a rush of endorphins in your brain because you made a purchase, like, this is something great, and it goes away. And the research shows that people who, when you buy a new car, if it's I don't know, Skoda Octavia, or you buy a new car which is Maserati, the dopamine response in the brain is the same. So a billionaire who buys the most expensive car in the world and a regular person buying a regular car, the feeling, oh, I bought a new car, it's the same. You cannot have 10,000 more dopamine in your head, right? You have the dopamine response. It's that's it. And then people think, like, if I buy this more expensive car, I'm going to be happier. No, you won't. It's the same. It's the same. It just doesn't matter, right? But until you feel it, you don't know it. And this is hard to learn and hard to understand. You have to think about it, meditate on it, live through scenarios like, how would I actually act if I'm a millionaire? What would actually change? What wouldn't change? And this is where you realize, what are the values? What are the things that you want to do with your life? Because if I tell you now, Anna, I give you $100 million tomorrow, what would you do? You would still record this podcast because you want to have conversations with people. Mm-hmm. You want to meet people. You want to help. It wouldn't change anything. Maybe you would buy something nice for you, but then it would become boring. I met a couple of people who are millionaires who it's like, oh yeah, I have millions in the bank, but whatever. And they still do their work because they love their work. They love people. They love doing their stuff. A couple of days ago, I spent a weekend with a friend who's a millionaire, and he has the same PlayStation I have. We ate the same pizza, drank the same Pepsi. It was the same. What is important is the connection you have, conversations you have with people, the experience you go through. We travel together, and we talk about stuff that is not work, money, shit. It's like, what can I experience? There are experiences that money can only afford, right? If I want a helicopter ride from whatever, you need to save up some money for that. But this is something you do once. You don't do that daily. It's something that you can afford if you're smart about it. Some people can do it like tomorrow. Somebody who works will need to work for a couple of months, but it's an experience you can afford. It's not something that, like, I want to have a boat. Cool, but rent a boat. We can rent a boat. I rented a boat with a bunch of friends. You don't need to buy a yacht. You can rent it, and it's actually not that expensive when you divide it by 10 people who are all having a regular job. It's not a problem to rent a boat in the Mediterranean and sail for 10 days. It's not that expensive,
Hmm.
actually. But people have like, I have to buy a boat. That means that I'm successful. You can rent it. Buying a boat is a hassle. You have to take care of it. You have to gas it. You have to maintain it. Why would I do that to me in my life? I don't want to worry about that.
What you're saying right now goes against the grain of everything that we have learned about life. At least that's how it began. Did it start for you when you moved, or did you always have this understanding like, no, you actually need to see the world a bit differently?
When I was growing up, so it was during the war and post-war. My mom worked. My dad was in the war, so I was with my grandma a lot, and we didn't have money. I was always kind of conscious that money is not something that is available always. But if I look back, I had a happy childhood. I had everything that I needed. I didn't have everything that I wanted. I have everything that I needed. Marrying the wants and the needs and understanding what is the things that I need and what is the thing that I want. When I started my first company, my primary reason to get more money was to make sure my family is secure. I helped out my parents a lot. My sister at the time, my grandma ended up in a hospital, so I was paying for her care and all that stuff. I had an opportunity, I was in a situation where I grew up next to a family member who traveled the world for work, was extremely wealthy, but spent his entire life making money and not seeing his family, not seeing his wife, not seeing his kids because he was always away. I had that type of a job. And then when he finally retired to enjoy the wealth that he accumulated, his wife got sick, he got sick. He spent the entire wealth on their health and operations, and they both died and they had nothing. So entire life was spent on making money, and then that money was spent on the health because he shot his health to shit working for the entire life. And then he died and had nothing, right? There's a quote I really love to use. If I gave you $1 million now, how would you feel? You would feel great. Oh my God, I got $1 million for free, right? It would be an amazing feeling. Cool. I give you $1 million now, but you don't get to wake up tomorrow. You still want it. No,
No.
like why would you? Like, okay, how about 10? I give you 10. You don't get to wake up. You
No.
want 10 million? No, 100. So there's no amount of money that you would say yes to if you don't get your tomorrow. So that means that your tomorrow is worth more than millions. So why don't you act like that when you wake up in the morning?
Hmm.
Why don't you act like, oh my God, like this is worth millions. I got this opportunity to be on this planet today. It's amazing. My life is great. You're healthy. You're young. You're beautiful. You're doing your thing. You're traveling. You're doing all the things. Like, I guarantee there's no millionaire or billionaire in their 60s, 70s, 80s that wouldn't trade places with you like this and give all the money away. We forget that. It's so easy to forget that because, oh, I have bills to pay and I have to do this and it's like all the daily bullshit that's being force fed through media, social media, news, radio. This is important. And you're trying to chase your own shadow and your own tail. Why? We need to internalize that we have everything here and now. Healthy man has 1,000 wishes, a sick man has only one. Every morning I wake up, I'm healthy, I'm alive, I'm going to do the thing. And for me, my greatest achievement is in life, and still is the goal, is not something that you achieve and then it's done. It's something that you need to retain, and that's the option to do whatever you want to do with that day. And I'm not living my life according to anybody else's schedule but mine, right? I wake up without an alarm clock. I do things that I love. I do things that I enjoy. I contribute as much as I can. I get paid for some of the things that I do, and I just do that. That's worth more than being in the office 12 hours a day, not seeing my wife, not seeing my friends, and then having, I don't know, $1 million in the bank. For what? So I can tell people like, oh, look at me, I have money. It's again a feeling that lasts a minute, a day. It's not something that it's constant, right? We all live our lives 24 hours a day. When you look at other people, you see a glimpse of their 24 hours, like, oh, look at him, it's such an amazing thing, he's sailing on a boat for a week. How many people never spent a week on a boat? It's a hassle. Like, you shit in a tiny little cabin. There's not a lot of food. You have to dock to get the water. It's a problem, right? It looks amazing for a minute, for a day, but you can't live on a boat. And I had this conversation before COVID that year, 2019. I did over 40 flights total of 40 flights in a year. And I would post like, oh, I'm here, I'm there. I would posting on my story, and there were people commenting like, oh, it's so easy life for you. You're always traveling. They don't see the jet lag. I was in Siberia, like all the ways that you travel to do all of these things. Like, yes, it's amazing, but it's also tiring. I don't see my family. I don't see my friends. There's a trade-off, but nobody talks about that. And it's
Yeah.
easy from the outside to look like, oh, you're constantly traveling. I don't post anything on social media anymore because I'm kind of over the ego hump of like, look at my life be like, ooh, this is all cool. No, no, no. I do my thing. My thing is for me. If I can share my experience and my philosophies to help people unlearn some of the bullshit about money and go and do some of the stuff, amazing. I spoke with really smart people who helped me on the journey as well. To come back to your question, did it start like that when I was young? No, it didn't. It was a journey. It still is. I'm still unlearning a lot of stuff. There are books that I read. There are people I talked to. There was a lot of videos from amazing people online that you can find who kind of shaped the way I'm treating everything I do as a chef. Everything I see is a bunch of recipes, and then I just take what works for me and creating my own. And the ultimate goal is to be grateful and have this really fulfilled life. And in order to have that, you need to be aware of what is the actual thing that you want. I would bet that anybody, if they look really deep down in themselves, it's not a closet full of shoes and a garage full of cars. When it comes down to that, once you even attain that, you realize that's not what thing you want.
Hmm. Wow. This is amazing. The conversation went in a direction maybe that was a bit more surprising to me. And I want to recap what we have talked about with these three lessons because that's what we want to get out of it, right? The lessons learned in immigration. What I heard, the first one was the reconnaissance and being prepared, coming there multiple times, picturing yourself in the place where you want to be. Maybe it was a good thing and easier, right? To know that this is London, there is nothing else I want, and this is where we're going. But still, it doesn't mean that it was not tough, it was not challenging, sad, maybe lonely at some points, but you built your life there. And this is how it is for many of us. When you focus on that, it makes things easier. Then the compromise, but also the third lesson that I heard was also letting go of the checklist lifestyle. So in a sense, there will be a checklist that you want to have for yourself, right? But this is your own checklist, and then everyone else checklist is not what you want to have. What I hear, and is also my experience as well, when I moved, I realized many things I came with were not valid, or they were wrong, or they were not the best solution possible. So I had to let go, and still have to, of many, many things that really are not making my life easier and better in the new place, or even in general. Making this kind of checklist and removing the items that are not yours is probably a lifelong journey. To me, maybe the immigration and the fact that you're in a new environment, somewhere where it's probably more suitable for you, is showing you it clearly. It's kind of putting the flashlight on it. But still, it is a journey for many of us. Would you like to add
Uh,
anything else to the list of the lessons?
no, you captured it really great. And I know we didn't get a chance to talk much about business and how to build a
Mm,
business. And this is a short episode, so we can't fit everything in. I'm more than happy to come to your show again and talk about that.
definitely.
But you're 100% correct. The only thing you need to compare yourself is yourself and your own wants and needs. And we all know comparison is a thief of joy. And also, one thing that kind of resonated with me recently was from Alex Hormozy. He said, when you do something and you know it's going to be hard, and then you start doing it and it is hard, you have to remind yourself this is what hard feels like, and you have to be fine with that. So you knew going in it's going to be hard. You keep doing it despite of it being hard, and just remind yourself this is what hard feels like, and you will go to the other side. If you keep that in front of your mind, it's easy to then do the thing because it's going to get better if you just continue doing it.
Yeah. In many ways, this hard is just that. It's hard. It's nothing else. It's not scary anymore. It's not painful. It's just hard. It's just one dimension. I can deal with it.
Exactly. There is no tiger. We, as a species, we come from a place like, oh, dangers are everywhere. But in the last couple of centuries, we got to a point where there's no danger anymore. You will not get eaten by a tiger if you get out of the house, right? So all of your hard is just self-imposed, basically. Yes, it is hard, but it's not life-threatening. You're not going to die. You'll manage. The society is here. We build it. Just make the best out of it.
Yeah. Wow, Tom, thank you so much. It's such a beautiful conversation, and I would definitely love to get you back to talk about business, about money again, anything else that we dig out. Stand up. Oh, it's another cool thing that we can talk about. Doing stand up in a foreign language. Oh my God. I know that with improv, it's like a whole new universe, but stand up is probably even scarier.
More than happy to come back. Thank you so much for inviting me, Anna.